Let's start a podcast about our mental health. For no good reason why, let's call it Mind Cake.
Hello, my darlings, and welcome to another slice of Mind Cake
Mind Cake.
with him,
Lee Cromson. And him,
Paul Beeson.
Bisson.
Beeson.
How
How you
you
doing,
doing?
Mush?
I'm all right. How are you?
Yeah, I'm good. I'm
Are
good.
you a little sleepy head?
I am. Bloody rugs are making me tired.
Probably it would have an effect on your respiratory system as well. I'd imagine all that dust before they're
Yeah,
clean.
and do you know what? See, recently I've been picking up dirty rugs rather than delivering clean rugs.
Story of your life, isn't it? Picking up dirty
Yeah, I know.
rugs.
Picking up dirty rugs
Yeah.
at the weekend.
And
Um,
cleansing them.
so I do, honestly, like my car's minging. I'm coming out in rashes and stuff, and I think it's
Mm.
just all like the dirt and dust and
People's dead skin.
yeah,
Mm.
all on my skin, which
Oh,
isn't nice.
yummy. I'm glad I've had my tea.
Yeah, I haven't had mine yet.
No, I know. So we're gonna we're
Uh,
gonna we're gonna bash this out because I have it on good authority, i.e. you,
yes.
that this dreams malarkey
Hmm.
is already an hour and 20 minutes long, so don't want us adding any more to that.
No, and you know, I had to whittle that down from about 2 hours or close to 2 hours. So there's been a good half an hour at least edited out of that episode already.
Right. And on the basis that you said that I went off at tangents,
Hmm.
I have actually, we'll come back onto this, but I have actually done some research
There's a tangent right there.
with my good friend uh,
Rachel.
Rachel. She's very well. She's asking after you. Um,
Oh,
about what was I talking about? Yes, about some of the tangents, which I don't think are tangents. But anyway, we'll get all into that. Let's introduce the guest, Paul, please.
so we have a smashing little interview with Ian Wallace
Is his name.
and Dreaming Dreams.
It's his game.
Yeah. Well, not Dreaming Dreams, I suppose. Analyzing Dreams.
Analyzing dreams, and I think I'm gonna misquote him here. Our dreams don't happen to us, we happen to our dreams.
Yeah. It's a really brilliant episode, I thought. It was dead interesting, wasn't it?
I'm looking forward to listening to it back, if for no other reason than a lot of the things at the time went right over my head.
Mhm. Yeah, it was definitely worth another listen in the edit. So when I was editing it and revisiting it, I was still just as interested as I was when it happened live. So
Right.
yeah,
Well, let's get right into Ian Wallace and his dreams.
after you.
No, after you. Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Mind Cake. And today we are lucky enough to be joined by dream psychologist Ian Wallace. How are you, Ian?
I'm great, thank you. How are you, Lee? And how are you, Paul?
Very well, Ian. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you.
We'll kick off with the first question, which I noticed on your website. You say dreams don't just happen to us, we happen to our dreams. And I was wondering, could you explain how we actively create our dreams and what that says about the connection between our conscious and our unconscious minds?
Yeah, that's a great question, Lee. I'll have to take a sip of tea before
Like,
that.
you take a sip of tea, I'll take a sip of water. Paul, I noticed you haven't got your mind cake mug today.
No, it's still dirty from the other day.
There's a whole very interesting history here. One of the fascinations that people have had with dreaming for centuries, for millennia, is just it's such an apparently unusual phenomenon that everyone experiences. So everyone dreams, even though people say they don't dream, everyone dreams. People have tried to explain why we dream and where dreams come from. So it was thought for millennia until about the mid 1990s that dreams happen to you. When you're lying asleep, you're just lying there like some kind of psychic receiver and tuning into the ether, and some supernatural being would send you messages of great importance. And that may have worked in the 13th century. But even in the in 1619, René Descartes, so he's got his famous phrase, cognitivo ergo sum, I think, therefore I am. That came from a dream because he was having this dream and he's thinking, oh, in this dream, I'm actually aware that I'm my own identity. I have this own self-concept. So that was about 400 years ago that people started thinking, well, are dreams happening to me? But no one could really prove it. And even now you get all the various dream experts with pointy hats and swirly capes that go, whoa, dreams, oh, yo. But the reality is that in the 1990s, South African neuroscientist Mark Soames, who's an absolutely lovely, lovely man, he was doing a whole lot of work around the neuroscience of brain structure and where in the brain dreams actually are generated.
Okay.
And what he found out was, and he was working with people who had had strokes, so unfortunately parts of the brain weren't working as well as they should. But he found out that all the different theories, even the scientific and psychological theories, that dreams were just random brain noise. That's the activation synthesis theory from J. Allen Hobson. He just said that your pointing brainstem creates a lot of noise when you're sleeping and you try and make sense of it. But what Mark Soames found out was that there are areas in your brain that actually become far more active when you're dreaming. And those areas are around your emotions, so processing emotions, creating stories, and understanding how you fulfill needs. Those are the three areas. So when you actually create a dream, then you are creating a story about how to resolve and process some emotional need to bring yourself some form of opportunistic fulfillment. In doing that, you realize that you're not tuning into anything. The dream isn't happening to you. You're creating everything in the dream. And then you can take that a little bit further forward and think, well, if you're creating everything in the dream, it's not just the places you go to or the events that happen, all the people you meet in the dream, and it's all the artifacts and objects that you engage with in the dream. And that goes back to Carl Jung's idea in the early 20th century that every person in a dream is some reflection of an aspect of you. So that's why I say that the dream doesn't happen to you. You happen to the dream and you create everything in the dream. And then once you understand that, it becomes a very powerful way of actually understanding your dreams. But the other part of it that's even more important is that in waking life, if you start to think, well, my dreams aren't happening to me, I'm happening to my dreams, then life isn't happening to me. I am happening to my life. I am an active agent in my life, and I have power and agency to shape my life the way I want. So it becomes a very powerful message rather than just thinking it's a passive process.
One of my questions further on down the list was I'd read somewhere that our brain can't create people. So we must have seen those people somewhere in our lives. So if I see somebody in my dream and I'm like, well, yeah, I had this dream about this guy. Don't know. Who was he? I don't know. I've never seen him before in my life. So is it a case that my brain, well, as you said, so there's three options now. Is it a case that my brain has created that person? Is it that my brain has out of all the information that we're taking in, I've seen him in my blind spot and my brain's put that information, so I have seen him. Otherwise, although I haven't consciously seen him. Or what you seem to be saying is that person is a facet of us.
Yeah, it's kind of all three of those.
Okay.
So what happens is that when you create a character, you're using them to express or illustrate some sort of emotional quality that you're processing. Say, for example, you dream about your grandmother and she was very caring and wise, but she was hilarious. Then you've got some opportunity to be funny, to be comedic in a situation in your waking life, but doing it in a very kind and caring way.
Mm-hmm.
So that sort of thing. It's a very interesting thing that happens with, and this will probably take us down a whole other series, but it's a very interesting thing that happens with generative artificial intelligence, because I don't know if you've ever used something like Stable Diffusion or DALL-E 2 or anything like this, but you give it a prompt and it generates a series of images which are all kind of the same, but they have variations on each other.
Okay.
And this is kind of how the brain works, is that what you do is, the classic one, I was working with a client this morning, and she was saying that I was having this dream and I was with my school teacher, but she was my sister, but I don't have a sister. And I think, well, that becomes really interesting because you've taken these different qualities and you create a composite character.
Mm-hmm.
So what you do is that everyone tends to think that you have a monolithic identity, that you're just one person and the name on your passport or your security badge at work, and that's you. But you're actually a whole family of identities. You're a young boy, you're an old man, you're a young girl, you're an old woman, all these things, all those parts of it. When there's someone in the dream that you don't recognize, then you've constructed them from various emotional experiences that you have. So it might be that your father was a disciplinarian, was very distant. So you take right distance or discipline, and I'll add it to this other person who may have had a very confident swagger.
Hmm.
My dad was very reclusive. So you have all those things and you start to construct. So you make a complex character out of various components and you construct that into something that represents some emotion or situation in your waking life that you're processing. You might be walking through Glasgow Queen Street on your way to catch a train, and out of the corner of your eye, well, I'll pick out, that middle-aged woman looks a little bit anxious, and I'm feeling a bit anxious about something creative. So I'll just take that in as I rush to catch my train. So you take in all these experiences. There's, I think he's no longer with us, but Professor Benjamin Libby, who did a lot of work on the unconscious. He was at the University of California, San Francisco Medical School. And in 1973, he did an experiment on how much information you can process consciously and how much you can process unconsciously. So we can have a wee pop quiz here. How many pieces of information do you think you can consciously process in 1 minute? So consciously, so it's things like what am I having for dinner? That guy, Ian, did that trick with his hand. That was amazing. Just all those sorts of things. How many pieces of information do you think you can process in 1 minute?
I think it's a lot because I remember this is what I think that so the brain takes in, and again I forget the numbers, but the brain takes in like thousands of bits of information per second, but you only register like what's important. So you don't register that person over there. And that's why when I think we've had this conversation before, Paul, that's why when everything else is going on and there's a loud room or whatever, if you hear someone go, Lee, your brain will pick out that one bit and then you turn on the basis that I think it's thousands of bits a second. Yeah, I would say it's a lot. Paul?
I was going to say about 100. I was going the opposite. I was going.
No, I'm thinking it's far more than that.
Yeah, but your brain's processing loads, but you're only consciously.
You're only
getting a tiny percentage of what you're actually taking in. That was my thinking.
Okay. Yeah, so Paul's closer there. So in the orders of magnitude, he always wins. So what Benjamin Libby found out that consciously you process around 40 pieces of information per minute consciously.
Okay.
But then, and he was doing it with a large sample size, this is more what you're thinking about, Lee, how many pieces of information do you think you process unconsciously per minute?
It's going to be thousands.
Yeah, so he found out through experimentation it was between 10 and 11 million.
Jesus.
So it's a massive difference. And there are people who have done work since then, people like Stanislav Dehaene and George Lakoff, and they all reckon it's somewhere that 2% of what you are, of your brain activity, what you're aware of, it's about 2% consciously, about 98%, at least 98% unconsciously.
Wow.
So all that information that we've been talking about, and most of that information is not physical or mental, it'll be emotional or spiritual. So you bring all that in, and because you can't consciously process it, it just gets absorbed experientially and spiritually. And then what your dreams do, the fundamental function of dreaming, is to process your emotions and to process what we call the spiritual, the unknown, the unfamiliar, what lies beyond the horizon. So that's what you're doing. You're taking in that huge amount of information, and it may be that there's been a little look from someone, or you've seen a brown manila envelope fall from the letterbox into your doormat. All those little things can add up, and that's what you start to process when you dream. And the way that dreams work is not, people often try and interpret dreams realistically. So the second most common dream is your teeth falling out.
Yeah.
People say, oh, you need to go to the dentist, or it's just because you're getting old, or you're worried about your looks, or in some cultures it means an elderly relative's about to pass away. But in reality, teeth are all about power and confidence. You show your teeth either when you're smiling or you're snarling. So the way that working with dreams is all about working with analogies. And that's what Aristotle said. The person who's best at analyzing dreams is the person who can recognize resemblances. So that whole part of it is you are using all these emotions, those absorbed emotions, and you make analogies with them. So rather than going, well, I'm really worried about this thing or about that thing, you construct a story that's an analogy, it's an allegory of the thing that you are processing emotionally.
No wonder if we're processing that much information, no wonder I'm confused half the time.
In your brain, well, the conservative figure is 86 billion neurons, but you have 100 billion neurons in your brain. So those are the nerve cells that run your brain. And each one of those nerve cells, each one of those neurons is connected synaptically to other neurons. So you have at least a quadrillion connections in your brain because each neuron is connected up to 10,000 other neurons. When I work with large organizations, when I'm doing corporate psychology, one of the things that I share is that if you have an organization of 1,000 people, that organization has more synaptic connections in the brains of its employees than there are grains of sand on planet Earth. So it's just an absolutely colossal amount, and and everyone's got one, whether you use it or not, or how it's employed. But you have this 100 billion neurons and this whole combinatorial explosion of all those connections inside them. Some people say it's the most complex structure in the known universe.
Mm-hmm.
It is, and the way that it processes a lot of its information is through dreaming, which a lot of people think anything to do with dreams is a lot of nonsense, and it clearly isn't.
No, and I guess we've talked about. I was going to say, well, one of the most common misconceptions people have about dreams and their meaning, and like I say, you've touched on that with the teeth. I was going to say, ultimately, and this is where I get into dark territory between brains and AI. Ultimately, the brain is just a supercomputer, isn't it?
No, no,
Or it's not.
it's
Okay.
not. And as I was mentioning before we started the podcast, Lee, I'm currently the chief technology officer of an AI startup
Mm-hmm.
and working with large language models and large concept models, and what we have a conceptual space model as well. Many of your listeners might fall asleep here, and you guys might fall asleep. But the way that an LLM works is it works statistically. You feed it huge amounts of text, usually from stuff like Twitter, now X, and Reddit and things like that. Lots of teenage boys or people who have opinions that don't really need to be voiced. But you feed it with that, and it probabilistically works out what the next word in a sentence. So if I say, if you feed into ChatGPT or Anthropic or whatever, you say fish and, it's probably going to go chips. If you go tuna and, it'll probably be sweet corn. So that's kind of the way it works. It works in a very linear, probabilistic manner. The way that your brain works, it works on probabilities up to a point, but it does it spatially. So it's not just doing this straight line along like that. It's doing something far wider, and it's far more complex than a current LLM. And that's why it is interesting that LLMs hallucinate. They're delusional, and it's a lot better now with things like retrieval augmented generation. But the reality is, in doing that, then it's one of my classic peeves that I have, because I do as part of the dream work that I do, and as a psychologist, I do hypnotherapy work and guided visioning work. And because of that, the classic thing that hypnotherapists will say is your brain is like a computer. It's like the Paul McKenna stuff. No, it's not. And that's why things like cognitive behavioral therapy doesn't really work that well, because it locates all the issues within the head of an individual rather than working with the context that they're in. So if you're a single mother living in a moldy flat and you're having mental health issues, what CBT will say is, chin up, smile is just a frown turned upside down, all that stuff, rather than addressing the issue of where you are and what your concerns are. So, so the brain is not a computer. The brain is something far more powerful than a computer. But if you view it in that very computational manner, that's very transactional, of something in, something out, then you're not really using it to its full capacity.
Mm-hmm. I think I've known for a long time that I'm not using the brain to its full capacity. And I can almost guarantee that however many neurons I've got, Paul's got at least 10 more.
At least 10 more.
10 very important ones.
But 10 very
Yes.
important ones, yes.
So what's interested me so far? Well, everything has, Ian, but there's so much crossover in what you're talking about. There's a psychological element, there's a scientific element, a spiritual, philosophical. You've mentioned quite a few philosophical things so far as well, talking about Descartes and Aristotle, I think. Do you have to sort of have an all-encompassing kind of viewpoint to do the work you do, or did you come from a more because you're a psychologist, so did you come from that background and then open up into spirituality and philosophy, or has it always been a mixture of things for you going forward?
Yeah, thanks, Paul. So it's just curiosity mainly. I'm just absolutely fascinated by human beings, just like being one myself and thinking, who am I? Where did I come from? What do I do? What's my purpose? All those sorts of things. So I started off as a psychologist, but the reason I started off as a psychologist was I was just fascinated by dreams as a child. And then I did work in a psychology department at university for a very few months after graduating, and I hated it because it was all statistics and politics, like university politics, where everyone's at each other's throats because the stakes are so low, just that whole part of it. So then I thought I would run off to sea, as you do when you're a young man. So I was a roughneck for a while out in the North Sea. And then I've always been attracted to really high consequence, complex situations. So I've done a few things in that area. But all of that, then, when you think of, so you might read something like Jung or Freud. It's a classic thing that someone says to you, oh, you work with dreams, are you a Jungian or a Freudian? And it's like asking, do you support Celtic or Rangers? Do you kick with your right foot or your left foot? Just that whole thing. It's, oh my God, it's like all these other football teams. So you think, well, what, Freud said this, and you think, well, he said that, but I'm not sure that's coming up in the work I do. So I've always been very practical. One of my other catchphrases is a dream is just a dream until you put it into action. So how do you actually step into action and take that information from your dream? Say it's the teeth one about power and confidence. How can I empower myself or appear more confident in waking life? What are the steps? So it's that whole point that, another thing I say, dreams are answering questions that you're not even aware that you're asking. I'm just always asking questions of situations because that's what dreams do. And I think, well, I need to learn about this thing. And then, so-and-so said that. So if they said that, then what was their context? And what was the space that they were operating in? And then before you know it, you're reading French philosophers from the 20th century and wishing you were on the left bank smoking Gauloise, wearing a stripy jumper and trying to sell people onions. So there's that whole part of it. It's just that trying to try and get as big a worldview as possible, because that's what your dreams are giving you, and trying to understand that. And then, as you know yourself with working with people, you kind of modulate your behavior with them. You think, oh, I'll try this out, I'll try that out, I'll do this thing, I'll do that thing, and see what the outcome is. So I didn't start off when I was a young man thinking I must know everything about everything. I just thought, well, that's interesting. And then, there's this bloke said that, and this lady said these things, and I tried this thing, it didn't really work, but then I tried this other thing, this variation of it, and that was brilliant. It's not part of the qualification to work with dreams that you have to know what Aristotle had for breakfast or anything like that. You just have to have that curiosity to step into the unknown and the unfamiliar and question what you find there.
Paul, you recommended a book to me, The KLF.
Oh, yeah.
And in the KLF book, he talks about, and I can't remember who was the manager. Was it Drummond?
Bill Drummond, yeah.
Yeah. And it's a very good book. I'm trying to think, it's not Matt Haig who writes it, is it? It's
John Higgs.
John Higgs. And there's a bit in it about Carl Jung.
Right.
And about how Carl Jung had this dream that he was standing in this particular place. He'd never been to Liverpool, but he was standing in this particular place in Liverpool, and I think he'd drawn it, and it was an exact replica of this street in Liverpool. I think Drummond had a dream about it, and he'd gone and stood on this manhole for about 6 hours to try and Because apparently this manhole was connected, it was something to do with ley lines or something, was connected to wherever Carl Jung was. And yeah, I mean, I suppose that goes down the path of, do you think that dreams can be as well as monitoring or being a feedback of our emotions?
Processing.
Yeah, processing, that's what I'm looking for. Thank you. Um, can they be, for want of a better word, premonitions, do you think?
Well, they can be, and I'll qualify that a bit. So there's three very interesting things there. So one is the whole Carl Jung in Liverpool on a manhole cover. There's the idea of premonitions and the idea of dreaming of the future or precognitive dreams. So there's those three things. So we'll do the precognitive and the premonitional ones first. Unfortunately, every time there's any sort of plane incident, like the recent South Korean one, the Jeju one, or the Azerbaijani one, I get emails from people or messages saying, I dreamt that was going to happen,
Mm.
which would be like a kind of a premonition. But the reality is that an aircraft crashing is the 16th most common dream from all around the world.
Right, okay.
And the reason it is, when it gets analogized, is that the sky is a symbol of thoughts and ideas. And airplanes are vehicles of the sky. So we use them to represent projects or the trajectory of ideas. So it's like, we need to get this thing off the ground, or how can we land this project successfully? So we have all those idioms around it. And so when you dream of an aircraft crash, there's some project or plan that you're working on waking life that you're concerned that you won't be able to land successfully. So there's that premonition dream and those kind of precognitive ones. There may be there's slight evidence of something beyond that we
Okay.
don't know. But fundamentally, it's just using that analogizing process. What your dreams do actually do is that they work out scenarios from the future. And they usually do this 3 or 4 days in advance, from my experience. So the things that, and again, this idea of curiosity. So Freud said that your dreams are just processing information from the day before. But the reality is your dreams process information from your whole previous life,
Uh-huh.
all the way back to birth. And they don't just do your previous life, they do your potential life. So they take in that kind of Bayesian format, they go all the way back, but say, right, I'm going to take all the information I have now and project those into future scenarios, and I'm going to process some of the emotions around that and actually consider opportunities. So your dreams, so people say, can you foretell the future from your dreams? You can't really, but what your dreams are doing is playing out various scenarios in that ludic sense. And then coming back to Carl Jung, one of the greatest students of Carl Jung was a guy called Joseph Campbell, who was I don't know if you're familiar with him. He wrote The Hero with a Thousand Faces and The Hero's
I think he was mentioned in the book. Yeah.
Yeah, so he was the guy that inspired George Lucas to create Star Wars,
Right, okay.
better or worse. And what Joseph Campbell did, he was classed as a comparative mythologist. He studied mythologies from all around the world and found that they were very, very similar. That's where you got things like the hero's journey from. But one of the really fascinating things about dreams, and one of the ways I work with dreams, so primarily it's linguistic and imagery based and working with emotions. But also, I'm far more interested in how the imagery from dreams manifests in the outer world. So the way that the people with the swirly capes and the pointy hats doing all the woo-woo stuff, and the guys with clipboards and white lab coats do, is like they're all looking into your head, trying to understand what's going on in there.
Mm.
And I think it's far more interesting to be inside, looking out and thinking about how all these things manifesting. And one of the main ways that manifest is in language. So, for example, we hear it in idioms all the time. It's like a big task. It's like, oh, we've got a mountain to climb. It's an
Yeah.
uphill struggle. So that's why we have all these sacred mountains all around the world. This is why we have pyramids in South America and in Egypt. So what happens is we take these mythical structures, and Joseph Campbell said, a myth is a public dream, and a dream is a private myth. So what we're doing in our dream is we're not just processing our individual emotional information, but we're processing cultural and social information as well.
Mhm.
And in doing that, we construct social and cultural structures like cities. And it's a really interesting, I get this reported a lot by clients, is that they've dreamt of this place. They keep going back to this place a couple of times a week in their dreams. and then they've been doing this for 30 years, and then they go on holiday and they're to this place they've never been before, and suddenly they recognize it all and they know how to get through all the streets and everything. Well, that's kind of because that's how most cities are laid out. You've got a shopping, you've got a central area, and that's how they spread out. And most cities grow up around a river, and a city will have a port. So there are all these structural and cultural phenomenon. So in a dream, I'm sure in Switzerland, near Carl Jung's house, there would be a manhole.
Hmm.
There'd be some sort of drainage system.
Hmm.
So we've got all these things that are repeated across. And then what your brain does, and this is a whole other podcast here, is that your brain generates a lot of what you're experiencing from memory. So you can think it's an experience happening right now, but your brain is actually taking what it knows. It works, to go back to the technical side, it works in exactly the same way that JPEG or MP4 compression works. So your brain's 3 pounds or so a couple of kilos. It's the most energy intensive part of the body. And it's trying to have a really efficient energy budget. It compresses a lot of information to try and give you this immediate conscious awareness. So what people do is that when you go to this place that you've dreamt about so much, and then it's suddenly there, you will start to overlay those memories from your dream onto the place. And then it's got that real emotional impact for you.
Hmm. Hmm.
So that's what Bill Drummond would be experiencing when he's in the streets of Liverpool and thinking, or when you go to someplace, and I've had this experience that I go someplace like, oh, I'm sure I've been here before.
Hmm.
Of course, there's lots of people go, oh, you were there in a past life when you were Cleopatra or whatever, and all those parts of it. So it's really easy to dismiss dreams as weird stuff that happens to you. But the reality that every major advance in psychology has been done through the study of dreams. And once you actually start exploring them, you realize it's not just about what's happening in your head. It's about how the whole world has been created, and not by some divine omnipotent being, but just how human beings construct their worlds and how they interact in it.
I wanted to ask you, Ian, from someone who suffers from very intense dreams that I find quite disturbing,
Uh-huh.
that then when I wake up can make me feel very disconnected for probably most of the day afterwards, where I just feel like in a funk, and I'm just feel very disconnected after I've had one of these dreams, and it can last all day.
Uh-huh.
Do you have any advice for people who are affected like that, as how they can kind of realign themselves into just almost, in the words of Taylor Swift, shaking it off?
The fundamental function of dreams is to process emotions.
Hmm.
And a lot of the clients that come to me, the reason they come to me is they are having nightmarish experiences. And people tend to split dreams and nightmares into two different categories, like fish and chips or tuna and sweet corn. But the reality is that all a nightmare is a really vivid, intense dream that you're creating. When you create a dream, you are processing emotions, but you're also trying to articulate them to yourself, even though you're doing it through analogies and image. And when you create something that feels nightmarish, it's out of control, it's really intense, then with that, then there is some quite powerful emotion that you're trying to process in waking life. So there are a number of ways to deal with that. The first one is good sleep quality.
Hmm.
So if you have poor sleep quality, then you'll wake up more often. And because you're waking up more often, you're not going to get the rest that you need, and you will feel emotionally out of sorts. This is just during the night, so your dream content will reflect that. So the
So
first thing,
maybe if you were interrupted by a 3-year-old and a 7-year-old every 5 minutes, that sort of thing. Okay, yeah,
exactly that.
yeah.
And or wondering, is that the 3-year-old going to the toilet? Is it just
Or is it a burglar?
yeah, is it all those sorts of things? Yeah. Is it a visitation? So there's that part of it. But the other part of it is actually engaging with the imagery. Now, there's a couple of ways to do that. One is to actually do this analogizing and interpretation process. And there are various ways to do that. Most methods that I am aware of are not particularly effective. I'm just being modest and self-aggrandizing here. The way I've used seems to work really well. So that's one way. We can talk a little bit more about that. But one of the things that I do with my clients, which is absolutely counterintuitive, is that I use those really disturbing emotional experiences in dreams, those nightmares, to teach them and help them to understand how to lucid dream. Are you aware of what lucid dreaming is?
Well, that was going to be one of my questions, was
Okay, thank
to
you.
ask about lucid dreaming. Yeah.
Yeah, so lucid dreaming, so people, again, there's so many misconceptions around dreaming, not just a cheese thing, but just everything. People go, oh, I know about this thing. It's like, no, no, no. People think lucid dreaming is about controlling your dreams, but you can't really do that. But what you can do is you can influence and guide your dreams. And the key part of lucid dreaming is that you become aware, you become consciously aware that you are dreaming. And usually what people want to do is like, I want to learn how to lucid dream so I can dream that I'm in some tropical island with a sexual partner of my choice. You think, great, thumbs up for that, mate, that's fine. But the great thing about a nightmare is that you try and wake yourself up from it because you think, oh, this is really scary, I want to wake up. But in that moment, you're actually lucid dreaming. And then that's usually, so you don't have to go to an ashram or a dojo or become a Buddhist to learn how to lucid dream. Just in that moment, you can think, well, I can wake myself up, or I can have some courage and confidence and just stay in this moment, in that liminal stage between dreaming and waking.
Mm-hmm.
And whatever it is in your dream that's really disturbing you, engage with it. So I do a lot of work with children's dreams, and usually it's a monster chasing them. So it's like, okay, turn around to the monster and say, do you want to be my friend? Or what's your name? Or, what have you been doing today? So, and it might sound a really stupid thing to do, but actually engaging with this part of yourself that's generating that emotion, then by connecting with it, then you take charge of it. You have agency around it. So whatever the content of your dream is, if you think, right, I'm just going to stay in this dream and I'm going to make a positive difference. One of the things that I've been doing during the past 5 years a lot is working with people who are experiencing extreme PTSD. And their dreams are just horrific. So you're back in the desert, your best friend's head has been blown off. What can you do in that situation? What can you do? Not wake yourself up. You have any power to do what you want to do. It's like, well, I'm going to put his head back on, bring him back to life. And in that floating moment, you're in a kind of a hypnotic state. In that state, then you can start to do that. And then that transfers back into your waking life again, that you can actually have power and agency in your waking life. So when you have those scary dreams, the best time to deal with it is not to wake up in the morning and think all day, think, those dreams, do all that part of it. It's just to think, in that dream, as I'm starting to wake up from it, go back into it. And it's a guided visioning thing or a hypnotherapy thing. But what you can do is, say you're in a forest, just as a general example, you're in a dark forest and you've been chased by a monster. And you've turned around, you've made friends with the monster, or ask the monster what its ulterior motive is in chasing you. Anything you want, just be really playful with it. But you can make the trees bigger and smaller, make them darker green, brighter green, make them closer, make them further away. And your brain can do that. Your brain can imagine these things. So in doing that, you're actually engaging with what that emotion is. And then it's not so scary. You start to embody that power. And then you can think in the morning, what does that image mean to me? How do I analogize that image? It might be that you're in some sort of conflict, and it's easy to think, well, where am I in conflict in waking life? But you can think in waking life is, where am I experiencing tension? Where am I trying to make a decision? Where do I feel powerless? Where can I step into my power? What would happen if I spoke up in this situation? So it goes beyond something like CBT. It becomes far more of a really healthy self-coaching process. Again, the dream's asking you questions, it's answering those questions, but you can also ask yourself questions. How can I change the narrative slightly? There's one of the things I do with my corporate clients in workshops called risk aversion, usually with finance organizations who are usually risk averse. But this risk aversion is 3 words. It's risk aversion. How can I risk a version of myself in this situation? What question can I ask here? How can I show up very slightly differently just to shift the situation to my advantage? So there's a whole number of things you can do with that scariness and that nightmarish to gain power over it. and
Okay.
use it to advantage.
I will give that a go and try some lucid dreaming. And it's interesting that you spoke there about PTSD,
Yeah,
and I've been doing some stuff on EMDR with Dr. Jan,
right.
and I found that very useful in processing. Well, there's a couple of things. There's EMDR, and then I've talked about this app before that I use, this meditation app called Luminate.
Right.
Oh, mm.
Paul's not a fan.
Yeah, obviously not a big fan there, Paul.
I tried it a couple of times and it just did my head in. I couldn't deal with it.
It's awesome.
Each to their own.
Have you heard of Luminate, Ian?
Yes, I have. Yeah, it's about at the last count, there was something like 20,000 mental health apps out there. There's probably about 25,000 now, so
Yeah,
there are a lot of them.
there are a lot of them, but Luminate, it basically uses your light on your phone.
Yeah.
So you have your eyes closed and then it flashes and plays plinky plonky music. And whether that is, it works for me because I'm not thinking, did I leave the oven on? Da 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 da. I'm thinking, oh look, there's a purple cloud, or oh look, there's whatever it is, and I'm just enjoying the kaleidoscopic images. But you can kind of see images, faces, shapes, colors, and I'm wondering whether that is my brain processing something as I'm doing that, similar to EMDR, similar to dreams, nightmares, whatever.
Yeah, it absolutely is, Lee. And all these processes, or most of them, so something like Luminate, but things like meditation, mindfulness,
Mhm.
a lot of spiritual and religious practices, hypnosis, are about quietening the conscious, critical, objective mind.
Yeah.
And as soon as you start to do that, then I used to do this a lot with clients, using flotation tanks. So the thing where it's like a saline bath with a lid, and you get in there and you just float around for 15 minutes. And because you're in complete darkness without really any sensory input, then your brain starts to generate its own imagery. And as we alluded to earlier, your brain's doing this all the time with all the JPEG and MP4 compression. But as soon as you quieten your conscious mind, then you will start to generate imagery. There's a point when you are just going to sleep, when you're lying there with your head on the pillow, but then at some point you'll get an uncommanded image coming into your brain, and it'll just be like something, something. It's called a hypnagogic hallucination. It's just that part when you're literally falling asleep there, which is also, if you can stay awake, is a very good time to practice lucid dreaming because you can play around with that image. But that's what your brain does. As soon as your conscious, critical brain, your prefrontal cortex starts to shut down, then you'll generate all sorts of imagery there.
We should maybe stick pins in my brother-in-law, and I'm gonna offer him up for medical science because John, hello John, if you're listening, he always has dreams about, I'm saying I have these dreams about, being chased, or I'm being hunted down for this whatever murder that I've allegedly done, or whatever it is. He's gone, oh, I've like, he's always a superhero, or he's flying about, or he's captain of the football team. He's always having, I don't know if he's just full of bullshit or whether he genuinely just has
Better
awesome dreams. Yeah.
Yeah, well, yeah, it sounds a bit like dream envy there, but also
There's dream envy. There's much envy, not just dream envy. There's much more going on there. But yeah, he always seems to have nice dreams.
Yeah, so but within those, so there's a whole lot to analyze there, but certainly the being chased and the murder dream. Very briefly, how to work with the imagery on that. So being chased is the number one dream from all around the world.
Yeah.
And it has been, as far as we know, from cave paintings in Altamira and in the Ardèche in the south of France for about 30,000 years. People have been having chase dreams.
Mm-hmm.
And again, working linguistically rather than woo is another word for a chase is pursuit. So a pursuit is chasing something or being chased. So if you dream that you're being chased, there's some ambition you are pursuing in waking life.
Mm.
You feel frustrated or challenged around it.
Wonder what that could be.
So then that then becomes, what is my ambition? What is my ultimate pursuit in this? And by asking those, you go into a self-coaching mode. The murder one is really interesting as well, is that when you dream that you've murdered someone, or the police are after you, then there's some part of yourself that people are suggesting or you feel forced to or somehow coerced into killing off. And it's very common amongst creative people who are, people say, "Oh, I just grew up. You'll never be an amazing guitarist or a photographer or whatever."
Script
Just
writer.
yeah, a writer, anything like
Let's
that.
just say, I'll just throw that in as an example.
Yes, just no one in particular, just as an example.
Yeah,
But
just
with that, and saying, yeah, you need to kill that bit off. You need to bury that part of yourself. And then the reality is that what you actually need to do is reanimate that part of yourself and bring that part back to life. Those whole things there. So very briefly, it could be just someone. We don't know who it is, Lee, but it could be someone with an ambition to be a writer.
could be.
It could be, and they feel that it's the pursuit that they want to follow, but for some reason that they feel they have to bury that part of themselves just now.
Mm. Wow. Who knew that was going to be quite so on the nose?
That's
I couldn't
incredible,
possibly
isn't
say.
it?
Yeah. But yeah, no, I have this recurring dream where I'm not sure whether I've done the murder, but the murder is being pinned on me by this gang, and I'm trying to escape this gang, and this gang just get me to do more dastardly deeds for them, and I'm desperately trying to escape and get out of this. I keep having to go and see the boss. I'm like, no, I don't want to go and see the boss again. He's going to give me another. I don't want to do all this bad stuff, and I'm constantly trying to get out of this like underworld loop. But wherever I go, they just keep finding me. So I'm either doing something that they're pressurizing me to do, or I'm trying to escape the thing.
Yeah, and
Anyway.
and that's exactly it. So you're thinking, well, I I have to go and do this thing,
Mm,
and I could be well, the example we're having, whoever this person is, they're thinking I could go and do this thing. I have to go and do this thing because I've committed to it, or parentally, or from my employer. But what I really want to do is have 2 hours and sketch out some ideas and write some things down.
hmm
So in that, and it is, if it's nightmarish, or if you want to try doing the little bit of lucid dreaming when you fall asleep, which is quite tricky because you're tired.
mm.
In the morning when you wake up, if you're having that dream, and if you've gone to meet Mr. Big in an abandoned warehouse somewhere, just have a chat with him and say, "Look, mate, I've been doing all this stuff for you, but I need some writing time."
Mm.
And then just and then the
What if he
unconscious,
blows my head off?
yeah, well, again with that,
That's the gamble.
then yeah, you just have to take it. You have to. But then you go, well, and it becomes hilarious and wonderful at the same time because then you can start really playing around with it.
hmm
It's, because I've had this related to me by other clients. You pull out a weapon or a gun and you go, "Oh, you could do the Crocodile Dundee thing." It's like, that's
That's not a knife.
this is a gun, mate. And you produce like a Gatling gun. So there's all those things, right, where in my life can I, I maybe need to be a bit more assertive here.
hmm
Do this, or I need to, when someone asks me to do something, sometimes I need to say the word no and establish some boundaries. And I'm not being nasty. I need to look after my own needs sometimes,
hmm
rather than always running around looking after everyone else.
That's interesting, and I wonder. So we're basically saying then is dreaming is a good thing.
Oh, absolutely.
If we didn't dream, we wouldn't be processing whatever we need to process from our conscious and unconscious minds.
Yeah, again, one of my catchphrases is there's no such thing as a bad dream.
hmm
When people are sleep deprived, either purposefully or non-purposefully, so either in a sleep lab or through some situation that they've found themselves in, there's a thing called REM rebound, where say you're awake for 3 days and then you do get some sleep. It will be nearly all REM sleep, it will be nearly all dreams, because that's really the most important part of sleep. So the deep sleep and the light sleep are good for repairing your body and
Yeah.
doing all the things that your body has to do somatically. I've done some work with US Navy SEALs, and they have a thing called Hell Week, where they're effectively up all week for 168 hours. But in that, as soon as they get some sleep, they get a couple of hours sleep during that, and you can stand in a tent and watch them. As soon as their eyes are closed, they're twitching. You can see their eyes
Oh,
moving.
really?
They're straight into dreaming. If you want to process your emotions, then you have to dream. And people, again, some of the work that Mark Soames and other neuroscientists have done show that if you can't dream due to some brain injury or some congenital issue, then you find it very difficult to engage with people or to actually
Mm.
live your life and run all the unconscious stuff that's happening in the background in that default network in your brain. So yeah, so everyone dreams. You have to dream, and it's from my perspective, it's the most natural and organic way to develop yourself and for personal development.
Do you think it's worth keeping like a journal, or because a lot of people say I don't dream, which as we've said, what you do, you just don't remember what they are. And I've had dreams where I wake up in the middle of the night, and then by the time you wake up, I must remember that. And then when you wake up in the morning for real, you've forgotten it. And I
Yeah.
don't know whether I've seen people do dream journals or whatever, whether you think that's a good way of making a note of maybe not even the content, but how regularly you're having particular themes of dreams.
Yeah, it's very good, and again, it's one of those things that it can be a bit of a chore sometimes. I
Yeah.
mean, you've got the time, and particularly young people do it a lot, is they journal. So there's two things that come out of that. One is that you can see a trajectory, you can see a narrative arc in your dreams. We said that dreams are very myth-like, they're very mythical. So you can see things emerging, existing, evolving, just fading away, and so on. So you get a feel for, and it might be that in your dreams that something shows up, or you're in a particular location, but then that location changes slightly. Or if you're in this warehouse negotiating with some sort of mafia don, then the warehouse might change, or it might be in a different location. So you can see that whole narrative arc emerging and understand how to go with that. And one of the things that I've been working on as part of the CTO work is we've not been doing it for dreams yet because we want to do something more with the interpretation and the narrative arcs of dreams.
Mhm.
Certainly, we've got a pilot mental health application that people have been using, and you can have a conversation with it, or you can journal. Then you can analyze the journal. So in that journaling, you can see that narrative arc as well,
Yeah.
and it gives you perspective. So you think, oh, I'm having that dream again, or I've been having this dream, but then if I look back 6 months ago, I was having this other dream, and oh, that's definitely some progress in there. So it is good to keep some form of dream journal, but keep it brief. So
Yeah.
who was in the dream? What were they doing? Where was it? And what artifacts were they using? And how did you feel? And then you think you kind of get a mood timeline. So you get that time series of thinking, right, at this time every month, I feel this way, or this
Yeah.
is in my dream. So then again, going back to power and agency, think, well, when that happens again, rather than me being really conflicted about it, I'll just accept it and think, well, I can't do much about that just now.
Mhm.
And then you feel much better about it. So that is one thing that you can use a journal for.
And make a note of whether I had the balls to speak to Mr. Big.
Yeah, you have to do it. You have to do it, Lee.
I'm going to speak to him. Paul, will
Yeah.
you come with me just in case it all goes tits up?
Yeah, it's like Nightmare on Elm Street, isn't it? We all just have this collective
Oh, yeah, I
fever
don't.
dream. Yeah.
You just take your
Yeah.
Illuminate app with you and just blind them.
That's
Yeah.
it. Yeah.
I find the Illuminate app does, because like you say, you do see and you think, well, where's that face cut? Or where's that? It might just be an object or a shape, or you think, well, where's that come from? But
Yeah.
it must be in your subconscious because it's generated from somewhere. So I find it, I find it really useful when when I've got the time, because I find if I'm too tired, it doesn't work. So you've got to be kind of not awake enough, but just in that sweet spot of not too tired where it's just.
So you're in a light hypnotic
Hmm.
state at that point.
Hmm.
And that's when it becomes really effective.
Can we go a bit woo woo?
Absolutely, yeah. Let's go there.
Well, I'm going to start by saying, Paul, have you seen the film Until the End? I think it's called Until the End of the World. It's an old film now. It's so
No, I don't
old.
think so.
The soundtrack was done by U2. It was around the sort of Actung Baby era. I think Sam Neill's in it.
All right. So early 90s.
It's a lot. It's a very long film. But one of the premises of it is that. But basically, there's these VR goggles in the days before VR goggles, and it records your dreams.
All right. Uh-huh.
But then people become so obsessed with what they dreamed about, they spend like more and more time spending their waking hours just watching in the goggles what they dreamed about, because it's all a bit blurry and it's brain waves and it's not like a clear picture. And people have just become, I suppose, it's a forerunner for social media, really. People just got addicted to these like dream goggles where they just spent all their waking time just watching what they were doing when they were asleep. Anyway, it's not really a question related to that. I just wondered if you've seen the film. I had noticed that some philosophers argue that our waking reality might just be a construct, much like our dreams.
Well, as I've been alluding to, it kind of is,
Mm.
scientific point of view.
So is this real or are the dreams real?
Oh, steady on now. So there's all the nonsense that people like Elon Musk and Mark Zuckerberg are saying is like, we're actually living in some sort of simulation just now. The
This
chances,
is what I was getting at, Ian. Yeah.
yeah, blah blah blah. But the reality is that that's not happening yet. So the way that the brain works is it actually generates a lot of your perceptions. So you, again, going back to the JPEG or the MP4 compression, if something changes in your experience, particularly in your visual perception, then you'll add it in there. One of the best examples is if you've ever owned a cat, or more appropriately been owned by a cat, and you change something, like you move something in the living room, and the cat comes in, it looks absolutely astonished.
Oh yeah, I've got 2 cats, so yeah, I know exactly what you mean.
Yeah, so because their brains are, they don't have 100 billion neurons. I think a cat's got about 1 billion neurons, but their brains are working in the same way.
Paul's cat's probably got 1,000,000,001.
1,010,000,000 neurons.
10 million. Slightly better than the average cat.
So you've got that whole part. So the brain is constructing, it's actively generating a lot of your perceptions. But then if anything changes within that, if there's anything novel within that, then it gets added in. The classic one is with visual perception. If you hold out your arm or your hand at arm's length, so I don't know if I can, so say it's like that, and your thumbnail represents the part of your vision that is being actively processed, and everything else around it is coming from very recent memory. So it's exactly the same way that JPEG and MP4 compressions work. So in that sense, your brain is very efficiently, from an energy efficiency point of view, is generating that perception. But it's not the whole woo West Coast California stuff of you create your world and all that part of it. You create your power and agency in the world, but you're not actually creating the whole thing, because if we want to get into modernism and postmodernism and all those guys with stripy jumpers selling onions and all that sort of it, then they spoke a lot about that. Is the world a social construct? And you've got postmodernism, post-constructionalism, post-postmodernism, metamodernism, all these things, people trying to explain that. But the interesting thing from that is that one of the other things from that era is, I don't know if it's on the soundtrack to the film, but U2 had that song, Even Better Than the Real Thing.
Mm-hmm.
And that's how a lot of people who produce and sell games and simulations say, it's even better than the real thing. And you think, no, I don't think it is, because you don't have all that sensory input and you're not combining it in a really contextual and constructive manner. So I've worked with clients who have massive, usually call them hives, high immersion video suites. So they have this thing where you go in there and you're surrounded by video screens. So it's a bit like the Sphere in Las Vegas, where U2 can't get U2.
Yeah, they just finished a residency there, didn't they? Everything's connected.
I know. Well, Bono on the phone soon, just. But anyway, so that whole thing of, and you're in there and it's a forest and you hear birds singing, but you listen to them singing, like, well, that's on a loop, and there's this faint breeze, but it's actually like some Glade plugin that someone's stuck in somewhere of forest notes. So you have all that, think, well, it's not the real thing. It's not that really grounded animalistic part of us. So I don't think that part is happening. But what I do think is that, because people say, well, in the film, which I've not seen, but I'm just making this up now, that if you're replaying your dreams, then you, on average, dream for an hour and a half, 2 hours per night. So there's a lot of other hours in the day, so they won't be watching the same thing again and again. if you can actually replay, you can do that yourself in the morning. Think, right, what was I dreaming about now? Was that connected? I did some work about 10, 11 years ago with a guy called Yuki Kamatani, who, as the name suggests, wasn't from Glasgow. But yeah, professor of computational neuroscience in Kyoto. And him and independently a guy called Jack Gallant across in the States using an MRI machine, an fMRI machine, put people in there and they didn't really wait till they were dreaming, but having these hypnagogic hallucinations, mainly because an MRI, as you know, Lee, is very, very noisy.
It's very noisy.
And also they couldn't afford to run it for 2 hours. They could only do the first 10 minutes. They took the fMRI signals and then assembled them into what they thought the person was dreaming about. So, and the way you do this is you show a person a whole lot of pictures when they're awake, like Marilyn Monroe, postbox giraffe, all those things. And you see what the signals they're getting from the fMRI. And then when they're asleep, you go, well, that's kind of the same signal. So that's maybe a giraffe.
Okay.
When the results came out, I don't know what they'd be like now, but it looks like, what is that? Is it a pillar box? Is it a parrot? Is it a parrot in a pillar box? And then, and Yuki's going, well, it's a parrot. And you think, well, thumbs up for that. But the key thing, as well as dreams processing emotions, is they process meaning as well. And it's like, what does that mean to me? So when you dream about your primary school and I dream about my primary school, it has the same kind of symbolic significance, the same mythical significance, but it will have a different emotional significance. So there's all those parts to it when you actually think about perception and how we construct those perceptions in the spaces that we do them in.
So just to clarify, we are not living in an augmented reality.
That would be my thinking, because if I was living in an augmented reality, I wouldn't be self-identifying as a baldy Scotsman. I'd be far more attractive.
Yeah, again, it's down one of the many rabbit holes that we've been down recently, Paul, in terms of magical thinking, manifestation. Dr. Jan has some things to say on manifestation. Chatting to ChatGPT about, are we living in an augmented reality? The podcast is, it's started off about mental health and well-being, but all these things are interconnected in my view.
Yeah, absolutely. In the work that I've been doing with the AI startup, we started off because we'd been working with PTSD experiences, and we thought, right, we'll do mental health. And then because the market's been flooded with mental health apps, and we still have the mental health processes that we use. But the area that we're really interested in now, and the work that we're talking about with some of these large construction companies, is psychological well-being. And that's the key part of it. And it's understanding your psychology, who you are, what you do, why do you do it, what's your purpose, what do you need, what do you believe, what's your potential, all those sorts of things. And be able to actually, through conversation and journaling, be able to understand that and be able to make it more manifest. So it's like with this, not an advert, but that's a Garmin watch that connects to a Garmin Connect app. So I can look at how many steps I've done and what my heart rate is and heart rate variation and stuff like that. What we're interested in doing is like, well, how's your individual focus been over the past week? How's your social collaboration levels? How consistently practical have you been? All those sorts of things. And to actually have a set of metrics for that you can look at. And they may not be absolutely 100% accurate, but the key thing is it prompts questions. It's like, well, how can I be more focused in this area? Or during this event, these employees all had the same kind of experience. How can we mitigate that in the future? So that is, I think, a more useful way to do it rather than doing it in a more haphazard approach.
Yeah.
We have a regular listener who I actually went to primary school with.
Just the one regular
Just the one regular listener. So it's a guy called Chris who I went to primary and high school with. And I remember it's just suddenly after 40 or 30 odd years popped into my head. We were out playing when we were young kids, and he said that he could control his dreams.
Yeah.
Now, maybe that's, his like being young and sort of not knowing what lucid dreaming is, but just having that kind of element of I can dictate the way that the dream goes. So, but he's a regular listener, so it would be great if Chris, if you're listening, if you could get in touch and let us know if you still lucid dream,
Mm.
and if that's a thing, or if that's, I mean, he might not even remember. If I don't know, but it just popped into my head there.
Maybe you dreamed that he said that.
Yeah, it's getting a bit meta there.
It is a little bit.
One of the things I did last summer with Lego was we did because they have this children's cartoon series called Dreams with Z's on the end.
That
And
makes it cool for kids, doesn't it? And you
yeah,
add a Z instead of an S.
yeah, and K's instead of C's and all that
Yeah.
stuff. But they so we did a survey that I so I constructed the survey for them, and then they went and ran it using an opinion. But we did a survey with 10,000 children from all around the world, so in all continents. And one of the things we found was, quite surprisingly, that a third of children between the ages of 6 and 12 report that they can lucid dream.
All right.
Really?
That kind of confirms what Chris was telling you. So it's very interesting that yeah, and again, that would be a whole other podcast talking about children's dreams. But that was one of the findings that came out.
Yeah, we need to get in touch with Chris and see whether he's
Lucid.
whether he's still lucid and whether he's actually still listening. I mean, we're on episode 40 odd now. I mean, he may have given up after the first 10. So who knows? If I'm going to go to bed tonight, which I'm planning to do, the first part of the question is there anything we can do in terms of sounds and smells that would affect our dream? And that's made me think about the fact that every night my daughters, particularly the 7-year-old, will go to sleep listening to an audiobook, and that will just roll on. So is anything that I suppose, as you're falling asleep, and then if you're listening to stuff whilst you're actually asleep, whether that's influencing what's going on in your napper?
Yes, there's a few questions there, Lee. So the one influencing things, yeah. So there was a big thing a long while ago that you could do your French revision by having a tape of French people talking while you were sleeping, and it kind of works subliminally up to the point. So when you're asleep, physically when you're asleep, the two senses that are still quite alert are smell and sound.
Okay.
So that's why some people have various scents in their bedroom to try and induce. And there's not a whole lot you can do about it. And it's like, because you end up dreaming that you're in lavender meadows all the time. So there's that part of it.
That'd be quite nice, though.
Yeah, it'd be quite nice. Yeah, or in a some sort of glade pine forest. I'm thinking, hang on, is this a glade pine forest simulation?
Mr. Biggs jumped out of a lavender bush.
Yeah, exactly. You're like, aha, so you're not a
He's just picking flowers. He was just picking flowers.
Yes.
It's misunderstood.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
So there's that part of it. But so you can influence things. That's why people listen to white noise things, thunderstorms, rain in a tent roof, all those sorts of things.
Mm-hmm.
Because again, that sort of white noise or brown noise or pink noise, it actually shuts down the critical mind, the conscious mind, and helps you sleep better. So you do have a more relaxing sleep. The key thing, part of your question there, is good sleep hygiene, like we mentioned earlier.
Mm-hmm.
So make your bedroom a haven, make it really, really dark. So don't paint the walls black or have any of that stuff, but just have really good curtains because you want to make it nice and dark, make it quite cool. And again, not cool like having posters and stuff around, but just cool in terms of temperature. Not cool with a K. It's all the cool kids with a Z. There's all that part of it. Try, and I know it can be tempting, but try not have any caffeine in about 4 hours before you go to sleep, because that will just keep you alert. Try not to drink too much before you go to bed, because a lot of people say, well, I like a couple of glasses of wine to settle me before I go to sleep.
Yeah.
And the challenge is alcohol starts off as a sedative, but then once your liver starts to process it, it becomes an acetaldehyde, which is a stimulant. And that's why after a couple of glasses of wine, you probably wake up after 3 or 4 hours, because it's like having a cup of coffee.
Mm-hmm.
You're stimulated again. So try not to do that. It's really hard to do, but try and keep all gadgets out of your bedroom. So like TVs, computers, phones, tablets. I always have a phone at my bed because it's now my watch, apart from this other watch I have. So just to have that there. So try and do that. And then that should give you good quality sleep. Try and be strict with your bedtimes.
Mhm.
So don't try and stay up too late.
Yeah.
You have to get up early. And then when you do put the light out in your lovely dark, cool room, then when you put your head on the pillow, say, tonight I will remember a dream or part of a dream. So you set the intention. And then when you wake up, whenever that is, in the middle of the night or in the morning, lie completely still. Don't chat to anyone. Don't look at the time. Don't even wiggle your toes. Because as soon as you start to move, then you start to lose dream imagery. So just lie completely still. And as you lie completely still, you get some images coming back to you. And they might just be like still images, like photos or little like TikTok videos. But then start to fill in the spaces between those images. You think, oh, right, so I went to see the mafia boss, and then we're in the lavender field. How did we get there? And fill in those gaps. So 3 words: will, still, and fill. Set the intention, lie completely still, let the images come back to you, and then fill in the spaces, and you'll get bits of dream narrative emerging.
Wow. Okay. That's some deep stuff. Is everything that we dream about meaningful? Well, I mean, you never have a dream about, oh, I must remember to get the MOT sorted. Well, I don't. Does anyone have like practical dreams?
Yeah, well, you say you don't dream about getting the MOT done, but what you might dream about, going back to your chase dream and the murder dream,
Mm.
is that you might dream you can't remember where you've parked your car. And the reason for that one, so we're using analogies again, with the whole Aristotle thing, working with language. What a car symbolizes is your drive and ambition in waking life. Anytime you dream about a vehicle, create a dream about a vehicle, it's about some progress you want to make in waking life. And a car's your personal vehicle for your personal ambitions. So if you dream that you've parked your car somewhere and you can't find it, then there's some ambition in your life that you have had to park. You have to set aside for a while. And then when you want to get re-engaged with that ambition, you're not entirely sure where you left it and where you left off from and how to re-engage with it. And then you analogize that into your waking life. You think, right, although I'm a pretty practical guy and I've got the MOT all sorted out, then you are using the car in the waking life.
Mm.
And that whole, the MOT thing, you're subliminally or unconsciously using that as a permission for you to pursue a personal ambition. So there's that whole part of it,
Wow.
of it working both ways in that. Even though your brother might be having all those amazing dreams, then people say, oh, I had a big dream. Because Jung talked about this a lot, big dreams that, they're really emotionally intense and they're full of all this mythical stuff going on. And it's like some superhero and you've got main character energy and all that stuff. But the reality is that everything in a dream, however trivial it might be, reflects on something in your waking life. So you may have some really deep emotions to process, but you may also have some more trivial emotions to process,
Mm.
or things you want to see as opportunities, or just being playful. Because this whole thing about asking questions and being opportune, another way of describing that is play. And it's that very ludic process of going, what if I did this instead? What if I improvised here? So some nonsense dreams are actually just very playful dreams. We're just trying scenarios.
Do you believe in the collective unconscious or shared dream experiences where people report dreaming of the same person or place?
It's really interesting. So Joseph Campbell did a lot of work on this as well, and a guy called James Hillman, who's sadly no longer with us, did some brilliant work on it. So there's the idea of the collective unconscious, which we've kind of spoken about, which is a more cultural unconscious, and it's far more to do with cultural symbolism. So there's that whole part of it. It'd be good to explore that at length. But in terms of shared dreaming, then there are a number of people. I mean, in fact, there's lots and lots of people. There are some quite prominent people who say that one of the functions of dreaming is to allow people to have these shared experiences while they dream. And the reality is, when you do this in sleep labs, which are quite sterile environments, they're not the best environments to study dreaming in, it doesn't really work. But what I have found because I've worked with a lot of dreams now, it's getting close to 500,000 dreams that I've worked with over the past
Wow.
40 years, is there have been a few occurrences where usually siblings, and usually in times of grief when a parent has passed, is that they will have the same dream.
Hmm.
And so they are processing quite similar emotions, the loss of a loved one, but they will independently, and it's not like I go out looking for siblings who are just about to lose a loved one or anything, sort of thing like that. But just, they'll come to me and say, oh, we had this really strange experience. And they'll recount the dream, and you think, well, that's exactly the same dream you've had. And part of it is because personally, you've had a lot of the same experiences, but culturally, you're also in that particular culture.
Yeah.
So, they might dream that they've met their father on a hillside, and it will be very. And you think, well, that is, somehow, you could say they've transferred psychic energy, and
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
so there's quantum entanglement going on, and one of Paul's cats has now become Schrodinger's cat, and all this stuff is happening. But the reality is that it's usually because they're processing very, very similar emotions in similar contexts.
Hmm. Hmm.
So there is that part of it that's really, really fascinating. I'm not sure that you can actually communicate between brains like that.
No, and we're going off at a slight tangent. I mean, again, I think it's alluded to in the book where not just dreams, but ideas. So how is it? So collective ideas and collective consciousness. How is it that I'm pulling figures at my ass, but 10 people around the world can all be thinking. So I'm going back now before internet and whatever, but all think about they were that far away from inventing the light bulb, and they all, so was it Edison? I can't remember now. But whoever it was who invented the light bulb, yeah, he gets all the plaudits, but there's another nine who were literally days, weeks, months behind him, but they're all living in different parts of the globe and would not have been in each other's. So whether there's this collective, I mean, again, we're getting a bit, well, we're getting very woo-woo with that, but let's.
Well, it's not so woo-woo because again, and just the technical work I do in the invention and innovative process, that's kind of how it works. So we said that LLMs work in this really statistical, linear, probabilistic fashion, but the way that human awareness works is not that way at all. It works in this far more abductive way. For example, things that are used in a particular way, then you use them in a slightly different way. So the classic example is the people who were really big on touch screens. So these infrared guided touch screens that we all use now was Nokia. You think, well, why didn't they invent the iPhone?
Mhm.
But someone like Steve Jobs or Johnny Ives or whoever was doing it at Apple was going, well, we could take this thing and we could put a touch screen on it. So those things exist already. It was like the Wright brothers, although they had the first powered flight, there were lots of people doing that and there are all sorts of stories. I think I'm trying to remember, someone told me recently, we're chatting about something else, but there's a Scottish person who lays claim to doing the first powered flight
Right.
somewhere near Cumbernauld or somewhere. Everyone is thinking, well, you've got something. The reason that you can have a powered flight is because Mr. Benz, a few years before, had invented a really lightweight engine.
Hmm.
And you've got motorbikes now. So the Wright brothers were bicycle constructors and bicycle mechanics. So they were putting motors into bicycles in this really lightweight frame. And then we're thinking, well, and they were very interested in gliding. Could we put this motor into a glider? And that's what lots of other people were thinking. So there's people in France thinking, can I
Yeah.
put an engine into a glider? So it's the same, because if electricity hadn't been invented, then Edison wouldn't be going, at the risk of stating the obvious, he wouldn't have had that light bulb moment of doing that and going, oh, right, so I can do this. Or, I now know about tungsten, and tungsten glows at this temperature and gives this white light. So it's like these machines that you used to get in arcades where you used to drop in a 2p and there'd be a whole tray of it shuffling forward.
Yeah.
And you keep putting in coins, and eventually there'd be this avalanche of coins coming out of it. Invention is not something like that light bulb moment. It is when lots of people are starting to piece together bits of things that are there already. It's very unusual that someone comes up with something completely and utterly new.
Yeah, so it's just the first person who puts in the last piece of the jigsaw.
Yeah. It's the same with the telephone, that someone else had invented that. And that's why patent lawyers make so much money, because there's always people arguing about who thought of something first.
When the Wright brothers, didn't they fly over, it's not a very Parisian name, but did they not fly over Paris?
I think, well, they came to Paris in, was it 1909, I think.
I'm
So
just thinking, if you're going to fly over anywhere, I think I'd rather have an aerial view of Paris than I would of Cumbernauld.
yeah, well, that's to all our Cumbernauld listeners, we didn't really mean that. Everything's fine there.
What do you mean?
Uh,
Oh, unless it's Chris. Is Chris from Cumbernauld?
uh,
Is
maybe.
it? No.
Well, in that case, we don't have any listeners in Cumbernauld. So it's absolutely
So yeah, but with that, so yeah, because the Wright brothers did it at Kitty Hawk in the sands of North Carolina, so they just had some sand dunes
yeah.
rather than the Antonine Wall and Croy railway station. So
I
it's
suppose I suppose Cumbernauld wasn't even there, was it? As we know it now, in
no,
whenever. No, it would have
Yeah.
probably just been nice.
You're also thinking that the aim was to get a nice view, and the aim was just to fly in the first place. It doesn't really matter where you are, does it?
Mm.
yeah, that's very true, Paul. So, but again, there's that whole part of how then that becomes abducted. You think, right, well, 1903 first flight, and then by 11 years later, we've now got people fighting with airplanes.
hmm
Bob Newhart classic routines about the Wright brothers, the first flight, and being excited about it, and then someone saying, "Yeah, but where's the toilet in this plane? Yeah, when does the drinks trolley come around?" So all these things get stacked and stacked and stacked, and it's
Yeah.
a process of evolution rather than something. So people all around all around the world are having ideas right now, particularly, I guess I'm closer to this, doing all the artificial intelligence work, but people come up with all these ideas, and you think, yeah, but someone else has thought of that 20 minutes ago, or doing this or doing that.
One of my millions and trillions of neurons has just made a connection there. Now might have been putting two and two together and making five, but is that you said there's a lot of people with all these ideas? Is that where the saying came from? Having their two pence worth, tuppence worth, because they're putting their two p's in the machine,
Yeah.
and then there's an avalanche of.
It could well be.
There you
It could
go.
well be.
Let's just say it is.
Let's just say it is.
Yeah, let's make it a
Like I
fact.
say, only Chris can say whether it.
Let's
So
make it a Wikipedia entry.
can I finish with a couple of very silly questions?
Yes, you can.
Gabrielle once said, "Dreams can come true. Look at me, babe, I'm with you." Do you think she was singing about me, or do you think she was maybe probably singing about somebody else?
Very possibly singing about you, Lee. But yeah, I get I get emotionally triggered by that song because because I have done a lot. I still do quite a bit of work in radio, and usually that's what I hear, or Dreams from Fleetwood Mac, or anything to do with dreams.
They
Well, that was
play
the-
a dream-related song before they
Dream-related
introduce you as
song.
a guest.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's like when they're on the wheel and they have to play a song on the wheel that relates to whatever the category is or whatever the expert is.
Yeah.
I mean, the other one I was going to say, well, you obviously heard of these songs all the time then, but Annie Lennox said,
Yeah.
"Sweet dreams are made of this," but she doesn't go on to explain what that is. Do you have any insight into that at all?
Yeah, well, that happens a lot in songs. It's like James Blunt. Sorry, guys, I had to mention him. But in his hit "You're Beautiful," he says at the start, "I've got a plan,"
Mm.
and then that's the last you hear of it. You think,
Don't hear any
mate,
more of the plan.
you're jumping into the sea, but you did have a plan.
hmm
Let's go back and let's whiteboard that plan out first
Yeah.
before you jump. So there's all those things. So yeah, a lot of song lyrics.
Well, you had one. We were talking about this the other night, Paul. You had one, weren't you? What was the one that you came up with? It was, I tell you what it was.
Can't
It was
remember.
Joseph and his Technicolor Dreamcoat.
No, any dream will do.
Yeah,
Lacks ambition.
exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah. It doesn't have a specific goal in mind.
Any
Just
dream
whatever.
will do.
Whatever.
Anything.
yeah.
Ian, thank you. I'm conscious this has gone on for an hour and 40 minutes, and I was thinking it would be about 40 minutes or so.
And we've not asked any of the questions that we had.
No, I've
to
got
ask
two
because we went.
pages of questions
Yeah.
here.
We'll need to get you back on, Ian, to further
I'd
delve
love to
into
come
this.
back on. Yeah,
Would that
I'd
be
love
all
to-
right?
Because we had a sleep expert on way back at the start
Mhm.
of our podcast. It was probably about 18 months ago now, was it? Something like that. But this is the first time we've kind of delved into dreams.
Right.
And it's fascinating, but we've only just touched the tip of the iceberg, I think, with this, haven't we? There's so much
Yeah.
more.
Mhm.
Um,
Yes, so if you'd be willing to come back on, Ian, that would be fantastic. And thank you for giving up Nearly 2 hours of
Almost 2 hours, yeah.
Yeah, well, it's not been a hardship. Really enjoyed talking with you guys. I'd be delighted to come back on and we can explore more of a bit
brilliant.
more psychology and amazing things.
Yeah, no,
Nice
that was
one.
fascinating. Thank you so much.
Yes, thank you very much, Ian.
Thank you.
Well, there we go, Lee. That was Ian Wallace, Dream
Yeah.
Warrior.
I was fascinated by it. I was fascinated by him as well because I thought it was going to be quite woo-woo. You know, oh, you think about your teeth falling out and that means so and so. Whereas he came at it from a very kind of what's the word I'm looking for? It wasn't woo-woo at all. It was, well, this is the science behind it, and this is what the misconceptions of dreams are. And actually,
Yeah. And I kind of touched on this in the interview. There's a lot of crossover between science and psychology and philosophy. There's lots of kind of different angles, but you're right. It wasn't what I was expecting. I was expecting more of the kind of spiritual, mystical kind of
yeah.
dream analysis where
We've had enough of them on, quite frankly. I don't know what cousin Carrie would think of this episode because she loves a bit of mysticism.
I mean, I do as well. Don't get me
Oh,
wrong.
yeah, you're all over that. You're all over the mysticism. We know that.
Yeah.
Wait until we speak to the life regression therapist. We'll find out all about your views on
Oh yeah,
mystical shit.
But yeah, it wasn't the kind of approach that I was expecting at all. But all the better for it, actually. It's especially when you were talking about your experience with recurring dreams.
Recurring dreams about murdering people.
Yeah, but what that actually means to you and your waking life is probably not what you pinned it on before that chat, I would suspect,
No, I just thought I was
mental.
mental, yeah. Yeah, I mean, I must admit, I was very interested in his sort of approach in trying to lucid dreaming and trying to apply your conscious mind and like have a chat with yourself in your dream and go, well, I know this is a dream and blah, 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 blah. I haven't managed to do that.
Yeah, 'cause that was going to be my next question was, have you had to managed to have a conversation with Mr. Big about
No, I
picking
haven't.
lavender?
I haven't spoken to Mr. Big. And actually,
Yeah.
for reasons which we'll go into another podcast because we don't want to go into that now, but there are some quite mystical woo-woo things that have happened, like unbelievable things, which because we've spoken about this off air. I am not going to
Oh,
reveal
yes.
those just yet.
Yes.
Neither of them have definitely 100% come off.
Mm.
However, there's been a lot of mystical shit that's gone on, and I was feeling very positive about 2025, and then I had a bad dream. I don't think it was Mr. Big, but it was a variation on Mr. Big, and I woke up and I felt awful, and I couldn't shake it off. I just felt, yeah. Well, I'll tell you when it was. It was the night before. So I had a shit night's sleep. I had terrible dreams, and I woke up to the news that Trump had the spat with Zelensky in the Oval Office.
Oh, right. Okay. Yeah.
And then obviously he's thrown him right under the bus. And then I think it was the next day or the day after he withdrew all help to military aid to Ukraine. And so I thought, oh, this is just, and I was in a right funk. But it all started with that dream. So what I've tried to do is just go to bed earlier to get a decent night's sleep and don't watch the news.
Yeah, and that's something that we've spoken about before, is trying to avoid the news sometimes because it is all just pretty bleak at the moment.
It's very bleak, and I think that because again we've had this conversation when we spoke to Aaron Balak that if you're trying to do a good thing, that's not really clickbait because people don't put out good news stories because that doesn't get people fired up emotionally to go, oh god, I'm gonna watch what's going on there. So it's always going to be bad news because that's where you have a psychological response to go, well, what's that all about, and get needled about it. So
Yeah.
it's never going to be, well, very rarely positive news. You're kind of bombarded with bad news, and I think, as we've said recently, I think I've noticed that after I've said I'm not going to do much social media on Mindcake,
Hmm.
I think I put my actual first post on Facebook for about the first time in probably a month.
Yeah.
And actually feel much better for not going online and checking the news and going, look at me, I've had a, well, why do I need to tell people that I've had an ice cream with Izzy or whatever, unless it's,
Because that's the kind of news that we want to hear. We don't want to hear about all the nasty stuff that's happening.
No, I know, but you know what I mean? I thought, well, why do I need to, I don't need to, well, just enjoy the, and that's a really shit example, but just enjoy the whatever widget it is or experience it is without having to kind of
But that's also something we touched on with Benny.
Benny
Um,
Stoic.
yeah, Benny
Mhm.
Stoic. That's not his name. Benny is a
Is a Stoic.
Stoic. Yeah,
Stoicism, yes.
which will be coming to your log holes fairly soon, listeners. But that was something that came up in there. I don't think it's too much of a spoiler to say one of the things is trying to live in the moment rather than spending ages posting about the moment on social media because then the moment's past.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think that's a good way to live.
So yeah, I think so. And getting back to dreams then,
Oh yeah, tangent.
well, we're going to tangent. Where did you think I went off at tangents?
Well,
Because I think I know where you think I went off at a tangent, and I have done my research, and I've got my little notes up here about how
all
to
right.
bat that back
Well,
across the net.
okay. Well, before you bat it back across the net, I need some further clarification. Did you listen to the unedited episode, or did you listen to my edited episode?
I haven't listened to the edited episode, no.
Okay, so you listened to the unedited one.
Well, I was at
So,
the unedited one, so
all right.
by virtue of that, yes, I have listened to the unedited episode.
Okay, right. So we no, hang on. You at one point
Yeah,
started talking about Edison inventing the light bulb,
yeah.
which then led on to the Wright brothers inventing flight,
Yeah.
which then led on to, oh, I'd rather fly across Paris than Cumbernauld.
Like, yeah. Did you cut that out?
No, that's still in
Oh,
there.
good. That's right then.
This is one of the things that I didn't cut out, Lee. So imagine the shit that I
Whoa, whoa,
had
whoa,
to
whoa,
cut
whoa.
out.
Hang on. Let's stop you there, right? So you're saying that's going off a tangent. I don't think it is going off a tangent, and I'll tell you why. Because the point that I made, and this is why I'm trying to find out where it comes in. So the point I made is that in the book The KLF by John Higgs,
Mhm.
which I have to say I read. By the way, it's my anniversary. I've gone off another tangent here. It's that my 4.5 year anniversary on Tuesday. I've got my oncology appointment. Actually, it's 4.5 years today since I was diagnosed. So as soon as we thank you, round of applause. When we finish this, I'm going to have a wee dram, and I would
Nice. I'll
like
have
you.
one
I
as
would
well.
like you to have one as well, please.
I will. I've got a nice little bottle of single malt downstairs that needs demolished, so
Let's do
I'll
it.
get wired in. Yeah,
Let's
yeah.
do it. So anyway, when I had my first operation, and
Mhm.
admittedly I was very high on morphine, I read on your no, I listened to audiobook on your recommendation, the KLF book by John Higgs.
I didn't realize you'd listen to the audio version.
Yes, it's very good because John Higgs narrates it himself.
Ah, cool.
So listening to that in my psychedelic state, he does talk about the concept of collective unconsciousness, which
He
is
does.
proposed by Carl Jung.
Hmm.
So I've written what's been written here. Carl Jung believed that humanity shares a deep inherited reservoir of symbols, archetypes, and patterns that influence our thoughts and behaviors. He suggested that this collective unconscious could explain why similar ideas, inventions, or artistic movements emerge independently across different cultures or individuals at the same time, a phenomenon known as multiple discovery or simultaneous invention. So and then they give examples of what things. Edison isn't on there. The telephone's on there. Alexander Graham Bell
Oh, yeah,
and
that came up as well, didn't it? Yeah.
Alicia Gray filed patents for similar telephone designs on the same day.
Wow.
This was before Tinterweb, kids,
Mm.
and lived on. So all I'm saying is that there is the Carl Jung. We were talking about Carl Jung, and he had this thing that, well, it says Higgs ties the idea from thinkers like Rupert Sheldrake, who proposed the theory of morphic resonance. The idea that once something is learned or discovered, it creates a kind of informational field that makes it easier for others to discover the same thing. This would imply that knowledge or patterns could essentially ripple through the collective consciousness, making certain breakthroughs more likely to occur at the same time. So I think that is relevant.
The dreams.
Yeah, because it's your collective consciousness. Because it ties in with, yes, it, Paul, don't look at me like that. It ties in because the other thing I was going to say was that the Carl Jung thing came up because he allegedly had a dream. Carl Jung had a vivid dream about Liverpool despite never having visited the city. Jung wrote in his autobiography, Memories, Dreams, or is it Memoirs? Memories, Dreams, Reflections, and considered it one of the most significant dreams, I'm going to highlight the word dreams, of his life. In the dream, Jung found himself in a dark, dirty city, could have been anywhere, but at the centre of this grim place was a small sunlit square with a single magnolia tree in bloom. He realised that the city was Liverpool and interpreted the tree as a symbol of renewal and spiritual awakening. Because it then goes on to, in the book, Higgs connects this to Bill Drummond, who was one half of the KLF, who had a deep personal and mystical connection to Liverpool. Drummond was so obsessed with the idea that Liverpool was a magical and creative focal point that he recounts the time that Drummond once stood on a specific manhole in Liverpool, convinced that it was some kind of mystical energy point, a portal to some hidden creative or spiritual force. Drummond believed that by standing there, he might tap into this energy or provoke some kind of creative or mystical experience. Carl Jung does dreams. He dreamt of Liverpool and also talked about the unconscious collective mind.
Yeah, well,
That's relevant, isn't it?
well, listen, first of all, I never said that the tangents weren't relevant. I said they were tangents.
Oh, okay. I was getting into the.
Yeah. Well, if you're gonna whittle on for 10 minutes, right? I think I deserve a rebuttal.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. Look, all I'm saying is you can have your rebuttal in a minute. All I was saying was that I didn't think I explained it very well because I was thinking, yeah, there was something about that in the KLF book. So I'm just filling in the gaps now.
I see. I see.
And
Yeah.
I'm glad I'm glad it did make the episode. Otherwise, none of that would have made any sense
Yeah.
whatsoever.
I really hope it did. Can't remember now. No, that's all in there. Yeah. Just to sort of clear this up for the listeners. So I sent Lee a voice note earlier saying, I've edited that episode and it took ages because you and Ian both love going off on little tangents.
Especially you said.
Yeah.
Mm.
Well, but we know this. We know this. Now, the tangents are related because that's what a tangent is, because we'll talk about something which will lead you on to something else, which something else, and something else. So I'm not saying the tangents aren't relevant. I'm just saying that there's fucking loads of them,
Mm-hmm.
which is why the episode is 1 hour and 20
It's
minutes
1 hour
long.
and 20 now, and now even longer because I feel the need to explain my tangents.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. But if you haven't read the KLF book, which was, I say, recommended to me by a certain Mr. Paul Beeson,
Thank you.
I would thoroughly recommend it, especially if you've got any morphine in the house.
It is. It's a really good read. And I was reading it at the time when the KLF's back catalogue was released on streaming platforms because it'd been
Is that the
removed,
contract that they wrote on the side of a Ford Cortina or something?
pushed off a cliff or
Pushed off a
something, didn't
cliff,
they?
yeah.
Yeah. And then they just deleted the back catalogue and basically left the music business. And then just randomly on the 1st of January, a few years ago, all their material just appeared on Spotify and Apple Music and stuff, like just out of nowhere. They decided to re-enter the music business. So I was reading it around that time when I was getting back into listening to them a lot as well. It was a good time. It was a
Mm-hmm.
good time.
Mm-hmm. Have we had any emails, Paul?
We have.
Oh, do you mean I have to do the jingle?
Yeah,
Well, I do the jingle anyway, just emails, and then you normally just say we haven't had any emails.
but this time we have.
Emails?
So we've had an email from Callum Scott.
Oh, Kalomsky.
Hello,
Do you know what?
Callum.
Do you know, it's something so I work with Callum,
Mm.
and he has a mind cake pen.
Does he now?
He does. He didn't buy it. I gave it to him. Regular listener to the show, and I'm gonna have to give him. He loves that pen so much. He's like worn all the paint off him. Bless him.
Oh,
So I'm gonna have to
even
give
I
him a
don't have a
new
mind
one.
cake pen.
Hmm?
Yeah, even I don't have a mind cake pen.
It's the old logo.
Oh,
Don't
that's
tell
not.
Callum. Just trying to get rid of him. They're just sat in my drawer doing nothing. Which actually brings us on to, I know this is email corner, but gone off another tangent, brings us on to the fact that we were going to get stickers done. Do you remember, if
Oh yeah.
anybody, if listeners, because we're not doing the social media anymore, if listeners wanted to sort of put up flyers at work or in their local town hall or prison, can we say that? Then we would send out like emails with A5 like posterettes that you could put up if you wanted to join the Mind Cake tribe, or could send out stickers if you gave us your address. It'd be a bit more costly because we have to pay the postage and buy stickers. But we were going to send out stickers. I mean sticker sociably was responsibly, socially
Possible.
responsible with your stickers, but
But as a
we
tangent,
were going to get a load done, weren't we?
yeah, but as a tangent, this also ties in with the KLF because just before they re-released their music, stickers with their logos and started appearing in random places around the country.
Did they?
Yeah, yeah. With a little pyramid with a little ghetto blaster.
Ah,
Yeah,
I didn't know that.
yeah. So there's one. There's
So
another
they had, hang
link.
on. So they had the idea
Hmm.
at a similar time to I had
A
the idea.
collective
Oh,
thought
s- collective,
stuff.
collective unconsciousness.
Yeah.
Get in touch if you would like some stickers, which segues into before we are bombarded with emails with people wanting free stickers. What emails have we got to date, Paul?
So as I was saying,
Have we got anything from Callum Scott?
we've got an email from Callum Scott. Hello, Callum.
Oh,
Apparently,
never
he's
heard of
got a
him.
mind cake pen.
Yeah, yeah.
So his email is answering your shout out. You did a shout out a little while ago to try and get some questions from our faithful listeners
Yes.
to put towards our future episode with psychologist
Dr. Carolyn.
Dr. Carolyn. That's right. So we're going to get her on, and we asked for some questions, and Callum has emailed a question. Shall I read out the question?
Read out the question.
So he says, the real question we all want to know is when they are not working, are psychologists secretly assessing us non psychologists? An
But
interesting question.
no, well, it's not. It's the easy question. That's yes is the answer, Callum. Have we got any other
Okay, well,
questions? We don't need to
thanks.
close that one.
Thanks for emailing in, Callum. I'm
Thanks,
sure you
Callum.
can thank Lee in person for completely just disregarding your email there. We've got another email from John Hanna.
Our John Hanna or the
Yeah,
actual John Hanna?
not that John Hanna, our
Right.
John Hanna.
Okay.
So he's sent yeah, fairly lengthy email. So
A
I'll read
McNabb
it.
length or just a normal length?
No, it's not McNabb. It's not McNabb
Not
length.
McNabb
No, no,
length.
no.
Okay.
So, morning, Paul and Lee. I thought you might appreciate a wee email response to your latest podcast. I thoroughly enjoyed listening to Phil and Wendy. Great work. Whilst Lee does not fit the criteria for a wig, Paul could possibly donate his facial hair to Lee whilst not needing it for his acting jobs.
Rude.
I can also confirm that the Hannah household have multiple boxes of junk. Our favourites include cables, keys, batteries, pens, and general trash. These are generally either in a box or plated in a kitchen drawer. So this is in response to the Casey's Clutter Cure. which hasn't been on yet, has it?
Hasn't been on
But
yet.
but again, but we went off on a tangent where you were talking about your box of cables.
I have taken a picture of my box of cables.
You have,
I haven't
and
posted it yet.
I don't think I brought it up at the time, but I was going to ask our listeners if anybody has a messy drawer, and it seems that John Hannah does. He's got the kitchen drawer that's just full of
Everybody's
nonsense.
got one, apart from you.
Yeah. So he carries on. If it was up to me, I would get rid of it all. However, I'm not in charge. That's a little insight into the Hannah household there. I was also intrigued at hearing about Lee's new best friend, Rachel. Was she
Yes.
introduced to Lee by Brian Stroke Barry?
No, I think what he's referring to there is that when I did my, which again ties in at a slight, there's a slight segue there in that it's 4.5 years today, that on the episode, my diagnosis episode, thank you, another round of applause. On my diagnosis episode, I explained about how the fact that this Barry, or was his name Brian, I can't remember, was going to come into my life wearing my slippers.
Oh, that's right. Yeah.
Him, that bastard, coming
That
in.
bastard.
Yeah.
Oh,
No.
right. So, I mean, that's
no.
that's an
Imaginary.
old throwback.
But I
That,
think
isn't it?
that
That's going right back.
he's just showing that he's a committed and loyal listener. So no, it wasn't a fictional Brian or Barry that introduced me to the wonderful Rachel.
Okay. Like Gemma, I would have some concerns about trusting too much into Rachel's advice. I
How
do,
dare
however,
you?
find it all very interesting and clever, probably too clever. Whilst I think a podcast like this would be very interesting and amusing, I'm not sure I would truly trust the advice from an algorithm.
Hang on. Well, just like a couple of things to point out there, John. You wouldn't trust the advice, not that we give advice. We don't give advice, do we, Paul?
Oh God, yeah, no, we were going to say that in every episode,
We were
weren't
going
we?
to say
We
that in every
stopped doing
episode
that.
that no, this is not advice. We are not professionals. Professionals. So all I'm saying is that anything that Rachel says surely can't be any more harming or potentially harming than two other idiots who don't know their ass from their elbow.
Yeah, I mean, if anything, I'd trust Rachel more, to be
Well,
honest.
that's the point I'm making, John.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
But he does sign off
back
saying, yeah, he does sign off saying, keep up the good work. So
Oh,
thank you for your email,
thanks,
John.
Yeah. Has he got a new motor?
There's a reference for the kids.
He'll like it because I do say that to him quite a few mornings.
Oh God, do you?
Yeah. in the style of Alexis Sale.
Obviously.
Obviously, you can't just do it in a normal monotone voice. It doesn't
No,
work.
because that doesn't do anyone anything.
No. Okay, so 2 emails. That's good.
Not bad.
That's not bad for a fortnight.
It's double what we had last time.
Well, double of nothing is nothing, Paul.
Yeah.
Mm.
All right. Yeah.
I know you're.
You know what I mean. You
the
know what
maths guru, but
maths isn't my strong point. Get off my back with your numbers, your sorcery.
Okay, so yeah, we've witched on far too long already. The one thing I was going to say was, although I was going to do no more social media, I have got a new laptop because this one keeps dying. The battery keeps dying. Okay. So as a result, I'm having to transfer the files from this laptop over to the new laptop, including all the video files that have never been used, really. I was watching some of them as I was transferring them over. There is some funny shit in there. On the basis that we're not conscious that we are being recorded, because obviously it's not a visual medium.
Yeah.
And so I was wondering if I had the time or the inclination, whether that is something I should do at some point, because there'd be some unseen bits.
Yeah. Be good to just do like a couple of seconds from every video of just all the stupid.
Oh, that sounds like a lot of hard work.
Well,
we'll see.
You did say if you could be bothered. If you can, it's fine.
No, just put the episode out, but just with a lot of our. I mean, don't get me wrong. There's some shit that, regardless, we cannot put out there.
Yeah.
For legal reasons.
Some dark outtakes.
Anyway, On that note, so email in again if you fancy seeing some of the outtakes and visuals of me and Paul. There's some beautiful ones of you and your thick tash before Christmas when you were growing it for the Polar Express.
Oh yeah.
Anyway, minute and 30 to go.
Okay.
Are you doing housekeeping or are we just saying goodbye? Can you do a quick
Yeah,
housekeeping?
I'll quickly do my housekeeping.
Oh, Lisa's housekeeping. Oh, how very lovely.
So if you want to get in contact, you can email us at sliceofmindcake@gmail.com, or you can find us on Instagram at Mindcake Podcast. That's right, isn't it?
Right.
Yes. And if you type in Mindcake into Facebook, you'll find us there as well. And do like and subscribe because it helps the podcast reach more people. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Paul. That was wonderful.
Yeah. You'd think after 40 odd episodes I'd be able to do it.
Yeah,
But
you're very, look at his little face. You're very tired, Paul. Don't be so
I
hard
am
on yourself.
tired.
Don't be so hard on yourself.
Time for Bobos.
Time for Bobos. Less than a minute left. So thank you all for listening.
Yeah, and it won't be the same night because this will be going out in a couple of days, but raise a little dram to Mr. Lee Crompton for being 4.5 years still here.
Still here. Still here. Thank you, mate. No, I'm going to go and have one now.
Wait, I'll do the same.
Till next time.
Adieu.
Let's start a podcast about